My name is Glenda Sims, and I'm the lead accessibility expert at Deque, where I've had the good fortune of working since February 1st, 2011. And Tammy, let me let you introduce yourself.
Great. Thank you so much, Glenda. And my name is Tammy Cosseboom. I've been supporting organizations meeting their digital accessibility compliance needs for around 14 years now. So I am happy to help share my knowledge and experience with you all today.
Fantastic. So today's topic is accessibility audits, what to expect. And Tammy, why don't you get us started with motivations?
Thanks so much, Glenda. Yeah, so before we we took a dive and talk about what to expect from an audit, we thought it was important to discuss why are you motivated to do an accessibility testing at all? And primarily what we're seeing, and there's a number of drivers and a number of factors, but it is driven by legal. In many instances. So digital accessibility compliance recognition, it's increased within the commercial communities. And this is primarily due to the amount of legal actions that have been taken against organizations specific to an organization's website presence. So this has prompted organizations to seek guidance and assistance in this area. Many organizations find themselves in a reactive position as they have received a demand letter or there's been legal action such as a lawsuit that has been filed against their web properties. And to give the audience just a little understanding of that, in 2018, there were 2,250,000 web accessibility lawsuits filed. This is about 280%, give or take a few points there, increase from 2017. So the experts in the legal communities are actually predicting even higher percentage increase in 2019. And this is also bode true from first quarter sort of analysis on this. So based on this, organizations are taking a proactive approach as well. There's no need to wait for this to become a legal situation, and they want to mitigate their risk. And so they're being very proactive. And that just brings another area of you don't know what you don't know. So this is what's the why behind accessibility testing being done at all. Also, as more regulatory compliance drivers come into play with organizations, they're putting in very strict procurement guidelines. And the guidelines are really around getting their vendors that they already do business with notice that they are going to have requirements to provide their assets or their solutions level of accessibility before they can renew contracts. Also, in new procurement situations, they are demanding this with not only the proposals that are submitted, but proven the level of compliance that a solution actually is. So it really becomes a competitive advantage to make sure that you're getting your assets into some sort of accessibility compliance, depending on the market that you're actually soliciting or selling into. And above and beyond the legal competitive advantages that I've outlined in talking about regulatory, we're seeing more and more organizations incorporate digital accessibility into their corporate mission and strive for digital equality. And that's a really important factor to consider because it is really the right thing to do. So Glenda, now I'm going to turn the conversation back to you for you to provide additional information around the different disability types, as well as the digital assets that should be considered when you're taking on a accessibility initiative.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Tammy. So before we go all the way into this topic, I want to make sure that everybody in this session knows the abbreviation for accessibility. If you've ever seen the phrase A11Y and wondered what we were talking about, it's a short way of saying or writing the word accessibility. It's called a numerical contraction because there are actually 11 letters between the A and the Y. And accessibility is a hard word to type and takes up a lot of room, so it's just nice to know the shorthand. If you hear me say A11Y or ALI, that is just a shortened form for accessibility. So with that in mind, let's dive in. as we consider digital accessibility, it's important to make sure that everybody's on the same page when it comes to what is a disability. It's the whole reason we do this, right? And the official disabilities fall into 5 categories. If you and I were in the same room, you would see me touching my eyes for visual, my ears for hearing, holding up my hand for motor, touching my mouth for speech, and touching the top of my head for cognitive. These are the 5 major disability types to keep in mind. This is not just about 1 or 2 of the disability types. And while this presentation isn't in detail over that, I want to remind you that these categories aren't just visual, meaning blind. The category of visual covers low vision, color blindness, as well as the spectrum of blindness. So with this official disability as our foundation, let's ask the next question, which is, what types of digital assets and interfaces are we talking about here that need to be digitally accessible for people with disabilities? While we may focus a lot on web, whether that's a website or a web page or a single page app, digital assets can be accessible far beyond just the web. That can be our digital documents, whether it's a PDF or a Microsoft document or an ebook, multimedia, video and audio, your messages in email and text messages to your phone, software that's actually on your desktop, as well as native mobile software. If it's a digital thing, it can be accessible. And it's not just limited to what I call digital assets. It's also inclusive of digital interfaces, which might be including hardware, an ATM machine at your bank, a kiosk, maybe an airline kiosk or one in a shopping mall, office machines, including copiers and phones and printers, point of sale devices when you go to the store and are trying to pay your bill, even at a restaurant. I noticed a service kiosk the other day in an elevator. Smart devices, watches, and home automation, voice-activated devices, including our Alexas and Cortanas and Siris. So it's a lot of digital things that we use, and basically, I boil it down to this. If it's digital, it can be tested for accessibility. Now that I've laid out all the types of things and perhaps broaden your ideas, you may be thinking, oh, that was more than I expected. Where should I start? A very, very common starting place is the web, because it's open and free and customer facing as well as public facing, and many times includes your organization's core services and functionalities. So I'm not saying always start with the web, but it certainly is a common starting place. So if I remember correctly, I think I'm handing it back to you, Tammy. How do we know if something is accessible?
Perfect. Yeah. So I think it's important, if we go to the next slide, to discuss where do you begin? It's the number one question that we are always asked. Where do I begin and how do I start this? And really what the first part of it is recognizing which accessibility standard that you are trying to achieve. And there's a number of factors that go into this, and primarily the driver that we discussed earlier is a core factor. If your primary business is selling into one particular vertical market, then that vertical market is asking you for a specific level of compliance to a standard that exists. So obviously that would be a great starting point, if that is your main focus, is to adopt that standard. We're going to get into this in just a little bit later in this presentation, but really what standard are you going to choose and what level of achievement are you looking to accomplish? And you don't have to do that alone. That is something you can seek professional guidance in. And also the thing that I always tell folks is we're not going to leave you on an island. There are standards out there. There's not guesswork to be done. There's standards you can choose to achieve, and that is really important to understand. Going back to the driver, in terms of performing an accessibility audit, that really has a lot to do with what you're selecting for a standard. And most importantly, an audit that you perform should match the driver behind the initiative. So we go back to being reactive and proactive, and how we scope and work with that content and provide data really has a lot to do with the driver and what you're looking to achieve. And then you look at who will do your audit. So who will perform an audit for you? And if digital accessibility is new to the organization, it's highly recommended that a professional be leveraged to perform the audit. And the reason for that is there's proven methodologies out there that incorporate both the automated and manual testing that is required for you to achieve a level of compliance against an accessibility standard, regardless of the standard that you choose to meet. Automated and manual testing is required. There's a subset of results that can be gotten by automated. Manual testing is a core part of the audit itself. And in order to provide that efficiencies and methodologies around the testing to make sure everything is comprehensive and making sure that you are able to have timely results around your assessments. And this also allows for a big knowledge base and learning. So leveraging a professional to do an audit the first time you've looked at your web asset at all in terms of its level of compliance really allows you a big learning curve. It's a big training for your organization to even be introduced to this concept. Also, make sure that the professionals that you are using, it's okay to ask, what are your staff certifications? What are the credentials behind the folks that are actually doing the testing? How many of these audits have you done? How long have you been doing this? Because of the legal drivers that were mentioned prior in the presentation, this is a growing market because of demand and need, and it's a fast-growing industry. So it's really important to make sure that the professionals you're using have the experience and can provide you the knowledge to actually work with you after the audit has been presented. And next slide, please. And that allows us to really talk about this is not a one and done, and we'll kind of go through some of that later on in the presentation. But what you really want to do is you want to form a partnership. So the organizations you're working with from a professional standpoint, you want to make sure they understand your goals. They understand your development environment. Are you doing this in-house? Are you outsourcing? What are the goals after the results are delivered to you? That is really important in order to get the right guidance and for you to choose the right individuals to work with. Timely results are another very important factor, especially if there is a legal driver. You need to know what you need to know, and you need to know it fast, right? So at Deque, our accessibility audits take about 2 to 3 weeks. We'll work with iterative results as often as our clients need, and that really is providing you that very comprehensive information you need to understand your level of compliance, and not only that, but what prioritization is necessary to achieve a level of compliance in terms of going forth and remediating. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn this back over to Glenda so we can actually dive into what an accessibility audit is, and we can share that information with you now. So back over to you, Glenda.
Fantastic. So detailed accessibility audits really are about making sure you have a defined scope and actionable results so that you get what you need. And our agenda in this section is to cover a scope and what we'll actually see in an audit report, as well as give you some tips on how to compare professional accurate results and avoid endless debate and opinion. And we'll wrap up with an accessibility navigator term for you. So getting started, the scope of an accessibility audit, as Tammy mentioned earlier, understanding which standard and your environment. And then we're going to go one step deeper and talk about pages and screens to test. So let's take a look at what this means. From digital accessibility standpoint, the standard is WCAG. Those accessibility geeks, of which I'm one, often will pronounce this WCAG. We're really just trying to pronounce WCAG as a word. It is the International Standard for Digital Accessibility. It's published by the W3C, which is an international body for standards. It's also considered the standard for digital accessibility by the International Standards Organization, ISO. So what is WCAG? What is WCAG? Technically, it stands for Web Content Accessibility Guideline. That's what the WCAG stands for. However, if you can see the slide, you'll see that I've scratched out the words web content because I don't want anyone to be under the illusion that this guideline can only be applied to the web. Not true. It can be applied to anything that is digital. So I want you to think about WCAG as though it were the digital accessibility guidelines, and in the upcoming future version of this standard as it grows, I predict the WC will be dropped and it'll just be accessibility guidelines within the realm of digital. And if you get to looking at the WCAG guidelines, which I'm not going to go into detail today because basically if I were going to teach you WCAG, we'd have to hang out for about 8 hours just to scratch the surface. But within WCAG, one of the first questions that you'll be asked is, okay, web content accessibility guidelines, what level? There are 3 levels. There's A, which is the lowest level of conformance. There's AA, which is the next level. It includes A. And then there's AAA, the highest level of conformance. And while A at the lowest level sounds like a great place to start, removing major barriers for people that are blind or deaf or have a motor impairment, everywhere I look in the United States and around the world, the choice 99% of the time is to go to the AA level, both in legal requirements, DOJ consent decrees, settlements, everywhere we look, it's AA. Why? Because that next level of conformance also picks up major barriers for people with low vision. And that population, people with low vision, is huge and important. So A and AA are where you're going to commonly see requirements. AAA is a wonderful thing to shoot for, but I want to tell you from a compliance standpoint, it is not recommended as a requirement to be full AAA. So if all you walked away with in this session is WCAG 2.0, and I'll get to 2.0, A or AA, and not AAA at the beginning, that would be a good thing to have learned in this session. Moving forward, we also have to think about what version of WCAG we're going to use. Whatever you do, don't use 1.0. It was published in 1998. That's a long, long time ago in internet time. And it's been superseded by 2.0. In the United States and the world, excluding Europe, the appropriate standard to choose is WCAG 2.0 immediately. It was published in 2008. It has 38 requirements. And I'm telling you, A and AA is the most likely place that will be your requirement set. Now, there is a newer version of WCAG, and I love it. It's WCAG 2.1. And I encourage you, if you're ready to bite that off and be proactive in the United States, that it's a fantastic place to go. It was published in June of 2018. It has 50 requirements at the A and AA level. It includes every single piece of WCAG 2.0. So if you meet 2.1, you already meet 2.0. It's simply adding 12 new requirements. 38 plus 12 equals 50. Now, if you're in Europe or selling to the European government, Europe is ahead of the game and has already established WCAG 2.1 AA, including A, as a requirement for .gov in Europe. So depending on where you're from and who you're selling to, you may already be stepping up to WCAG 2.1. We do have a number of customers that are doing just that. So when it comes to the standard, WCAG 2.0 or 2.1 at the A and AA level is the answer to that question 99% of the time. So we have one question answered. What about your test platform? You want a detailed accessibility audit? What are we going to test it on? Are we going to test it on a TV, on a computer, desktop, on a laptop, on a tablet, on a phone, on your watch, on your ring? So it's important when requesting an audit that you actually have a conversation with the vendor to find out which one of these environments or how many of them you're going to test on. Any accessibility vendor worth their salt will be able to test on every one of the devices you could possibly bring forward. But everyone that you pick will add more work. Once we've picked the test device or devices, we then have to make another decision, and that is, what browser are we going to test in? How many browsers are we going to test in? And you may think, oh, well, I'm just going to look at my stats and see what my basic users are most frequently coming to my website for. And that is something that I'm going to say, don't just look at your web stats. There's a piece that I'll explain in a minute about how important it is to compare your browser to the specific assistive technology that you're going to want it tested with. Assistive technologies, most common form is the screen reader. And very commonly we see high usage patterns for JAWS, a screen reader in the United States. NVDA, which is an open source screen reader that is continuing to gain market share. If you're on a Mac platform, VoiceOver comes with a device. If we're down on an Android tablet or mobile, you may be dealing with TalkBack. There's also Zoom Text and Chromevox and Microsoft's Narrator and Nuance's Dragon Naturally Speaking. Hey, time out. Too many questions, too many choices. This is beginning to get overwhelming. I just want an accessibility audit, you may think. I agree. And so what I'm going to suggest is, while we could get caught up in the, I want to test on every possible device, and I want to test on every browser, and I want to test with every assistive technology, I'm going to suggest that we step back and look at the essential components of digital accessibility. And remember that as an organization, You didn't make the browser. You didn't make the hardware device. You didn't make the assistive technology of the screen reader or the voice activation. You're creating the content. You're creating the website. And it is the responsibility of the assistive technology vendor and the browser vendor and the media player vendors to meet accessibility as well. So if we look at it from this lens, then one of the smartest uses of your money is to test, if we're talking about a web property, is to test desktop using PC on Windows, NVDA screen reader, and Firefox. And while we could pick a bunch of other combinations, what I've seen in my experience, and I've been in the field for 20 years, is that if you will use this as your primary web platform, if I don't know anything else about you, extremely good return on investment for every dollar you're spending on that audit. And you're going to catch more than 90% of the issues out there. And as a person who is also an advocate for people with disabilities, I'd love it if your time and budget and motivations allow you to add extra use cases, but recognize that you already can get 90% of what you need by simply running one path, one platform, one screen reader, one browser. As time and budget allows, or if you're in a situation where you have a specific complaint that you're dealing with, really good idea to run some key use cases using perhaps Windows, JAWS screen reader, and the Chrome browser. Other common options are Mac with VoiceOver and Safari. On the mobile phone, you're going to get a different combination. On a tablet, you're going to get pretty much the same on iOS and Android. iOS is VoiceOver and Safari. Android is TalkBack and Chrome. And notice I'm being very specific about pairing a screen reader with a specific browser. And that's because screen readers have a best friend when it comes to browsers. The screen reader vendors actually prioritize fixing bugs on the browser they pair best with. So you don't just want to randomly pick, I'm going to use this screen reader with random browser. You actually want to find that screen reader's best friend browser, unless you enjoy spending your money testing for screen reader bugs and browser bugs, which more power to you if that's what you want to do and report them. I would just advise you as a client, considering that the browsers are all free and easily available, that you always look to match with the browser and screen reader that pair best. I'm looking for the best ROI for your money. So as I say this, you see, I have some suggestions. Well, what if you have some unique needs and you really want us to test on a specific platform with a specific browser? Absolutely, we can do it. And any vendor worth their salt can do it. We just want to make sure that you're getting the absolute most for every penny that you spend on accessibility, because that helps move accessibility forward. The next piece of the puzzle is pages and screens to test. If this is your very first audit, you may think, I really want to know what the whole picture is. I want you to test every page and screen on my website or my app. Well, how many pages and screens is that? Do you know? How many different development teams created that content and different content contributors? We're perfectly capable, and any vendor is capable of testing every page and every screen. Are you ready to do something with those results? Or is it better on a first audit to pick a very strategic sample? Again, I really want you to use your money wisely here. Pick key paths and core critical tasks, key entry points and user paths, highest traffic pages, things that are really obvious like your feedback forms or accessibility policy page. You can learn all you need to know at the beginning from testing 25 pages instead of 10,000 pages, which would be overwhelming with the results. So as you think about audits, every page or every screen perfectly possible. But when I mention the dev teams and the content contributors, pick a representative sample so that we spend everybody's time and money super, super wisely. If it is your first time working with a vendor, make sure the scope of the assessment is well defined. I have an image up for anyone that can't see it of a classic comic of the client first thinking they want a tree swing with triple level. And without any conversation with the vendor defining scope, the poor client may end up with paying for what they thought was going to be a triple decker tree swing and literally ending up with not even a swing that could sit down, but a single rope hanging from a limb. And that's what was delivered. As opposed to if you actually define your scope and realize that while you wanted the triple swing, it was really expensive and was going to take a lot of time, and that you realized in agreement with your vendor, you just needed a tree swing, single seat, and that's what you got. So pro tip, first time doing, we really recommend you define your scope with your vendor and build that trust. Now that we have a standard and platform and our scope defined, the accessibility experts have gone off to do their work, and you get the audit report back. What are the signs of a good audit report? Executive summary dashboard, specific issues found, impact, and how to fix. Let's dive in and see what that looks like. Being able to look at a big picture view of the report and seeing how many of the required standards of WCAG 2.0 AAA did you pass? Is it 90% or is it only 58%? Seeing not just what you failed, but also what you passed. Understanding the issues from a user impact perspective is also very valuable from that big picture, because all accessibility issues are not created equal. They're not as painful to all people. So perhaps seeing the impact on a 5-point scale, which is what we offer here at Deque, from blocker, critical, major, moderate, and minor. This helps with prioritization. And the top issues, so you have an inkling of not just I have X many number of issues, but 93 of them fall into a specific category, or 66 of them are color contrast issues for people with low vision. Gives you that quick insight into what lies beneath. Having that dashboard view is great from a leadership prioritization standpoint, but when it gets down to I'm going to go fix it, then the specific issues found, here are some markers of what you need to expect. You want to know exactly what requirement was failed, not just here is my failure, but exactly what piece of the standard did I fail. The impact on people with disabilities, so that can help with prioritization, a description of what the issue is, and the ability to see it in the browser. These pieces, and I have an example screen up here of a name role value failure in WCAG 2.0 or 2.1 with an impact on people with disabilities of major, and a description of a custom button does not have a role, and the actual URL that it's occurring on. So now we know the issue and what it's failing. The other piece of this is don't just tell me what's wrong, help me figure out how to fix it. So in that audit report, exactly what rule was failed, how do I fix it, including code examples, and even better, some references to further learning. This is the way we provide answers to all of our issues that we produce, because we don't want to just tell you what's wrong. We want to help you make sure you know how to fix it. We have links here to the W3C, which is the organization that established the standard, as well as a deep link into our Deque University materials with examples of it working correctly. And last but not least, there is value in the background. If your developers and designers have been doing accessibility for a while, great, they may already know how this helps a person with keyboard interactions or a screen reader. But for somebody else, understanding the why underneath it, that background, can be quite motivating. So, signs of a good remediation recommendation. And in Deque, we measure success for each issue and recommendation by this. I want to know that the developer that's receiving the report actually knows what requirement failed, knows where the issue is, has instructions on how to fix the problem, and if they've never fixed that type of problem before, has access to learning resources so that they can dive a little deeper, see code examples and things working. Find it, fix it, as simple as that. So, how do we know if we have professional and accurate results or not so much? So, my first word of warning, all accessibility pros are not equal. And I tried to think of a way to help you understand this. And I thought, professional simply means I got paid for doing the work. But that doesn't necessarily mean I'm good. Now, I probably won't stay in the business very long if I'm not good. But my example is, have you ever heard of an NFL player by the name of Ryan Leaf? Probably not. But when I was putting this presentation together, I Googled to find one of the worst professional NFL players ever. Ryan Leaf was paid to be a football player. One of the worst ever. Compared to Jim Brown, one of the best pro NFL players ever, according to ESPN. Yes, we could all vote on our favorites, but just remember, just because somebody does this for pay does not necessarily make them good. It requires a certain level of knowledge and experience. And as Tammy mentioned earlier, this market is booming. People are dying to get into it and make money. Ask them, where's their knowledge coming from? Did they read a book and have never done it? Is their experience so limited that they think they know it, but they actually don't even know what they don't know yet? At Deque, we're dealing with experts, years and years of experience of applied theory, answering difficult questions, being the go-to recognized authority. Make sure that when you're dealing with an accessibility vendor, that you aren't just picking up somebody that knows the right words to say because they read a chapter in a book last night. How much time does it take to be an accessibility expert? That's something that I think is a bit of a surprise for people new to the industry. And so I want to tell you that becoming an accessibility expert, a true expert, is going to take between 10,000 and 15,000 hours. Granted, it's not neurosurgery or astrophysics. Neurosurgery takes over 40,000 hours. Astrophysics takes over 26,000. But this is not something that people are going to learn overnight. It's a broad and deep field, and it's very nuanced. So remember to ask for years of experience when you're dealing with a new accessibility vendor, so you don't get caught with a half-baked audit report from somebody that really doesn't know what they don't know yet. And to let you know, I am proud of the quality that we have at Deque. We are the largest, most experienced, most certified accessibility business in the world. And I test that on a regular basis. We actually have competitions to make sure that our experts are doing A, quality work for our clients. So how do I make sure that at Deque we have effective, accurate, and consistent results? We define on any project that we're working on the exact standard that we're testing to. That is documented. That's what we're working with. We understand the difference between normative and informative. I'm going to get a little geeky here. Normative, if you're not familiar with the word, is required to conform. When you're new to the standards, especially to WCAG 2.0 or 2.1, it's easy to misunderstand which pieces of WCAG are the requirements versus which pieces are just informative, not required. So I see a lot of people that think they understand it, but they actually overcall and are making best practices act like requirements. And that's not cool with me. I'd love it if you want to do the best practices, but I never want to tell you that a best practice is a requirement when you might have very limited budget with a crazy timeline. I want you to be able to make that choice. So also a detailed testing methodology with step-by-step instructions on how the accessibility experts are going to find the issues so that we really have repeatable results. That has created the consistency and accuracy that we want for you at Deque. An additional piece that Deque offers is we have an issue description library that's been vetted by certified experts of exactly what is failing the requirements or is a suggested best practice. Our issue description library has cut out the ability for us to hire somebody and teach them exactly where the failures are versus the best practices and give consistent, accurate results to our clients. It's also available in a tool if you want to use it as well. So when it comes down to, do I have professional and accurate results? I say, show me the testing methodology. Because if it's normative, requirements clear and detailed, with very clear description of failures versus best practices, then you're going to know where your finish line is for accessibility. If any one of those pieces is missing, you might be on the Escher merry-go-round of accessibility unpleasantness. And I'd like to avoid that because that doesn't move us towards the proper goal of your money well spent and accessibility moving forward. So I don't know if you came to this presentation thinking accessibility is pretty easy and you can learn it in an hour or an afternoon. It is quite complex. Digital accessibility is complex. And you may be thinking, oh, I wish I had a navigator to help me through this. Well, at Deque, we really care about you moving in the right direction on digital accessibility. So we are offering a digital accessibility navigator service. And that's for You may get a report, but you have questions about it. We'd love to answer your accessibility questions. You may get a report, an audit, and want to go try and fix it. So now you want to know, did you really get it fixed? We'd love to validate that for you. Perhaps you need help with remediation planning, prioritization, or your developers need support. This is where an accessibility navigator comes in from Deque. So with that, Tammy, I want to hand it back to you to give us a wrap up.
Great, thanks, Glenda. Can you go to the next slide?
Absolutely.
So as Glenda indicated, there's a lot of complexity here. And one thing that we want to make sure that we're supporting you with is after we hand that audit delivery off, that we're providing the appropriate support through the navigator services. But we also want to make sure that there's no false sense of security, because we're asked a lot of times, now what, after I get the assessment and after I am brought into compliance, then we're done. And the answer to that question is really quite simple. You would be done if the site never changed again, because reaching a level of compliance is a point in time, right? Right after that you launch and you're using a content management system potentially to put forth your web content, and you have a content author that goes in and adds content to a page, it throws up an image, and there's no alternative text associated with that image, then your level of compliance, you're not at the level of compliance you were before that happened. So really, in order to effectively maintain a level of compliance, it's really about, again, working with that partner, because the partners have been doing this and their core focus, such as Deque, is on digital accessibility. So the areas that we would highly recommend is, what is the organization's strategy? Who's the champion? Who is the go-to with the organization when there's digital accessibility questions? What type of training is being put forth to content authors, to designers, to developers? How are you monitoring and maintaining the site to make sure that it isn't out of compliance? You do not want to just establish a strategy that every year we're going to perform an accessibility audit and wait 12 months to know where you stand. So by continually monitoring the site, you can understand possibly high priority issues that arise, and you could fix them as needed. And then if you're looking for validation or some type of certification of the site's compliance on an annual basis, then you could perform the annual site. So our goal here at Deque is to let you become as self-sufficient as you want to be. And that's usually done in phases, and it's done with a lot of support and training along the way.
So that brings us to the end of our presentation. And Laura, do you want to feed us questions?
Yes, thanks, Glenda. Great job, guys. Lots of great content here. A few follow-up questions. We have one from Julia, and they ask, how exactly do you prioritize accessibility issues? I know we kind of touched on that, but if you'd like to expand a bit more.
Absolutely. So it is very similar to the way an organization prioritizes any software bug. And what we do when we look at the issue is we're going to mark it as a blocker if there is no way for a person with a specific official disability type to make it around that issue. That's going to be the highest level blocker. And there are going to be the critical, which is the level 4, one step down from that, which is, okay, technically there's a way to get around it, but only the most resilient, technologically savvy accessibility people with disabilities would ever find a way around it. That's going to be critical. In other words, 90% of humans won't make it around it. And then a moderate, or I'm sorry, a major is, so it really has to do with the ability for people with disabilities to reasonably make it around that barrier.
Great, thanks, Glenda. So I know we talked a bit about how when you receive an audit, that's just being compliant or figuring out where you stand at one point in time. Mm-hmm. But there's a question that asks, do we provide a score that goes along with that audit report at the end, or how do people know where they stand in comparison to perhaps other people in the industry?
Yeah, and what's interesting is that scores are hard to calculate because of this. We continue to do that. The dashboard that I showed you, I think, is one of the best ways. I don't think you can have a single score and find your answer, because you may pass 95% of the requirements. However, if you have one blocker in your login process, then that could put you at risk. So it's a combination of that dashboard score that I showed you at the executive summary level of, I passed this many of the requirements, and how many of the issues that I have are blockers or critical or major, and then to skim through and see exactly which categories they're falling into. And we can help you prioritize those if those dashboards aren't enough to get you there.
Great, thanks, Glenda. Kind of switching gears here, Sarah asks, what's the difference between an audit report and a VPAT?
An audit report is going to be a specific assessment against a requirement like WCAG 2.0, 2.1, 508, I could keep going. The VPAT is a summary of the results. So the VPAT does not give you a detailed list of all of the issues and how to fix them. It just says you passed this requirement or you didn't pass that requirement. Not enough detail to go fix it.
Great, thanks. Another question here. They ask, how often should they revisit their ALI browser policy, accessibility browser policy?
Accessibility browser policy. Mm-hmm. So I do it, I have to defend it probably monthly, but you probably just shouldn't do it that frequently. I would say a quarterly or every 6-month cadence just to do a sanity check on it. And what I do is I actually talk directly to the screen reader vendors and ask them, what is the browser that you fix bugs for first? And what do you recommend to your users as their primary browser? So recently, when I was double checking on this for the JAWS screen reader, for years, JAWS has been IE, Internet Explorer. Okay, well, Internet Explorer is no longer being updated. And so when I checked with them, it was absolutely without a doubt, JAWS and Chrome is the number one. So quarterly or every 6 months at least.
Great. And another kind of question regarding frequency, how often should how often should digital properties undergo an accessibility evaluation for internal review?
That really depends on the criticality of it. The way I like to think about it is, when I was maintaining digital accessibility standards at the University of Texas at Austin, dealing with, hundreds of thousands of pages and apps and all kinds of things, what I wanted was a monthly cadence of automated testing. And that basically gave me the ability to have almost like eyes in the back of my head, because usually if you can do your automated testing once a month and keep an eye on things, then when a property starts to go bad, even though you haven't manually tested it, it's going to have some automated flaws that'll be apparent. So it's a smart way to keep your eye on the things that are already out there. For things that are going into production, the testing should be done during design, development, and QA. So it should start at the very, very beginning. But for things that are already out there, I do a monthly cadence. And then manual audits would be very representative for me because they're time consuming and they rot. A manual audit ceases to be valid the moment somebody updated the page because they could have broken it. They could have broken the accessibility. So manual audits, I'd have to have a discussion with you.
Great. So probably last question here. You mentioned that Deque's audits include remediation advice to help developers fix issues. They'd like to know if these code examples or other remediation tips are specifically tailored to the specific technologies the website or app is built on, such as a JavaScript framework or CMSs.
So the solutions that we have in Deque University primarily are in the web space are going to be the HTML, CSS, JavaScript, ARIA. And that'll give you the foundation for if it's on another platform. We do have additional pieces for the native mobile because that would be completely different. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.